The Drake Cutter is widely acknowledged as a fairly versatile starter ship, a platform to showcase different elements of what Star Citizen has to offer, and the Rambler variant draws on that, but thinks it worthwhile to move an internal bulkhead to reduce cargo capacity and increase living area, and for good measure to bolt on a great big fuel tank to considerably extend range. With Pyro right on the horizon, does that make the Cutter Rambler an interesting choice of starter ship? I'm Forrester, and this video will review the currently flyable Drake Cutter Rambler, which is described on the Star Citizen website as a starter expedition ship. If you've seen other ship reviews on this channel, then you'll be right at home with this video, which follows the same format. It's split into 5 sections, starting with a ship tour, assessing combat performance, reviewing handling and visibility, looking at the operating costs before finally summarising. As always, I've included timestamps in the video description in case you want to skip ahead. And if you're one of the many people watching who isn't yet subscribed to the channel, you might consider it, so you can be notified of future Star Citizen videos as they go live. And we'll start the tour for the Cutter Rambler by approaching from the starboard side and then moving around the front. The 2 weapons are clearly visible beneath the nose. To hop aboard the ship, you enter via a ramp at the rear. On either side of the ramp is a button which controls the deployment of it. Heading up takes you into the rearmost section of the Rambler, which is the cargo and component bay. The components are neatly stored on the wall behind these little barriers, with a small button allowing you to deploy them in and out. There's 2 single SCUs of cargo storage that are stored one atop the other, and on the other side is more component access. There's a button on the starboard side which allows you to bring the ramp back up. Right at the rear there are 2 small windows which allow you to get a glimpse of the view outside. Moving further forward into the middle of the Cutter Rambler is the habitation section. It's notably large for a vehicle of this size. Right at the back is some weapons lockers, as well as a suit locker. There's a bed for logging out with, and also a button at the back to toggle the light. At the back on the port side is a small toilet area. Unlike some manufacturers, Drake have chosen not to make the door see-through. There's a button that deploys the toilet. On the port side is personal storage to access the ship inventory, as well as a small dining table. There's a kitchen area, and a jump seat to allow you to bring a friend along with you. Moving further forward to the cockpit section, the glass canopy is clearly visible at the top. On the port side is some component access, and on the starboard side is an additional weapon rack. Like many other Drake ships, hopping into the seat brings you up to the actual seated pilot place. The Rambler comes armed with 2 size 2 weapons beneath the nose. By default, those are Badger repeaters. The capacitors have a reasonable store of charge and recharge relatively quickly. The Rambler also carries 4 size 1 missiles across 2 hardpoints, although swapping the hardpoints could allow the ship to use up to 2 size 2 missiles alternatively. Defensively, the Rambler has a single size 1 shield generator, which doesn't do a lot to keep the ship safe, but could be enough against the smallest of threats. Altogether, that means that the Rambler can dabble in low-end combat, particularly against AI targets that don't hit particularly hard, but the ship will struggle against more heavily armed opponents. but perhaps that's to be expected for a ship badged up as a starter and exploration ship. Looking out to the front of the cutter affords good visibility, and out to the sides can be okay depending on whether the canopy armour is deployed. Otherwise, the feel of the Rambler is one of being in a bit of a box, perhaps a little like an RV might feel, but actually that seems appropriate given the role of the ship. In terms of handling, the Rambler feels much like the base cutter, which is to say a little sluggish but not terrible. The SCM limiter defaults to 180 meters per second, which feels fast enough, and at those speeds judicious application of boost is needed to avoid too much drift through heavy turns. One feature for the Rambler is the inclusion of rotating VTOL thrusters, which toggle 90 degrees to give the cutter extra thrust downwards. There aren't many situations in game where that's needed as at patch 324, but nonetheless, it gives character to the ship. In nav modes, the Rambler will top out at just over 1000 meters per second, which isn't the fastest, but also not overly slow. The stock quantum drive is not great, but what the Rambler does have in its favour is an extended quantum and hydrogen fuel tank over the base cutter, which makes it a strong contender for covering longer distances away from home. The Cutter Rambler is fairly cheap to operate, with repair and rearm costs usually in the low hundreds of Alpha UEC, and refuel potentially in the low thousands if you've really run the tanks dry. There are no shortage of options to claw back some of those costs, however. At the back are 2 SCUs of cargo storage, which could be used to run low-end hauling or delivery missions. It's worth adding that the grid only seems to like 2 1 SCU boxes, and although it's possible to rotate a 2 SCU box to fit in there, it doesn't want to snap to the grid. Low-end combat contracts are also feasible for the Rambler, although the ship does struggle a little more when it comes to larger opponents. But the Rambler is also well suited as a base for some of the other gameplay missions on offer, such as operating as a platform for investigation missions, or for the bold, perhaps even using a jump seat to pick up personal transport beacons if they become available. Starting with upgrades for the Rambler, for those sticking around Stanton, improving the quantum drive to a faster unit is probably a good choice. Something like a VK00 or similar to drastically cut down travel time. After all, the fuel tank is big enough for that. Depending on how the ship is intended to be used, there's also some potential to change the shields, cooler and other components. It could even end up being a little project. The benefits are probably limited, but the components are easy to access internally, so perhaps it's the sort of situation where regular users of the Rambler would simply replace components for upgrade choices as they find them in the verse. There's a lot to like about the Rambler. Increasing the size of the living space makes the ship feel a lot more habitable. It could conceivably be a home away from home for players. There's a hot seat in the back for a friend, a bed, dining table, and a bathroom closet, even plenty of room for activities. For a starter ship, that's especially notable because competition from the likes of the Aurora or Mustang are much more limited in those regards. There are plenty of small details that help make the ship feel more characterful, things like the canopy armour that can be deployed when entering a dangerous situation. It's not a functionally important feature, but all helps to build a vibe for the ship. The Rambler isn't particularly good at many formal gameplay loops. It has a small cargo area, isn't really competitive at combat when compared to a dedicated fighter, but it gives enough for players to experience a flavour of what Star Citizen can offer. That tiny cargo bay, for example, is enough to do some basic transportation, as well as potentially even fit a ground vehicle for the brave and bold. The combat performance is enough to showcase a little of what combat in-game feels like, and that's probably sufficient. The cutter is a Drake ship, and this is anecdotal, but flying around the Rambler, it does seem to get stopped and scanned by security forces on a suspiciously frequent basis. Where the Rambler does excel compared to other ships at this size and price is in pure range. It can go further without needing to stop and refuel. That big fuel tank strapped to the top makes that purpose obvious, as well as the big headlamps up front. The Cutter Rambler is for getting out and experiencing the verse, seeing the sights, visiting different places, and doing it all from a ship that makes you feel like you're right at home. And with Pyro release just around the corner, that could make the Rambler an appealing choice for many exploration types. Which brings us to price. In-game, the Rambler costs around 750,000 credits, which is actually fairly accessible to even new players as a second step in the game, to potentially unlock access to both Stanton and Pyro from a single ship on a single fuel tank. For real cash, it's $50 as standalone, or potentially a cheap upgrade for somebody with a game package already. Whether that's worth it largely depends on what a prospective owner intends to do in-game. For an exploration type, it could be very appealing. All in all, the Cutter Rambler was a surprisingly fun ship to fly. It has personality, it has purpose. That big living space and those large fuel stores let the Rambler do something that not many other starter ships can do, and all in an environment that have you rooting for it. That little Rambler that travelled the verse. Yes, it's not the most profitable ship, and yes, if you're min-maxing, you'd probably choose something else. But if you just want to get out and experience the sights that Star Citizen has to offer, you might not go too far wrong with the Cutter Rambler. But do you agree? I'll be interested to read your thoughts in the video comments. If you enjoyed this video, you might press the like button to help me understand what videos to make more of in future, and if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, you might like to do that too, so that YouTube knows to show you more videos like this in future. But otherwise, and as always, thank you for watching.